Welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for the public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Please remember your words and actions should be chosen carefully, and members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting is concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record the meeting, providing that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. None. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silence. Welcome to those in attendance. I now ask Mr. Bishop to introduce the officers for this meeting.
Morning, Chairman, members. My name is Kevin Bishop, Lead Development Manager for Planning Services. We have 3 items on the agenda today. Item number 6, land at Warm Hill, Engrove, Woodland, Deep Dean, Rossall Y. The presenter will be Simon Rouse. Item number 7, Carwendy Farms, St. Wanards, Hereford, will be Elsie Morgan. And item number 8, Satnett Farm, Woolhope, Hereford, will be Clive Lloyd. In addition, we have online our Highways Officer, Katie Jones, and the legal advisor to the committee today, Simon O'Leary. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Substitutes. We have the following substitutes. Apologies. We have received apologies from Councillor Milne, Councillor Foxton, Councillor Davis, and Councillor Paul Andrews, and Councillor Johnson. Name substitutes. We have the following substitutes. Councillor Fagan for Councillor Milne, and Councillor Durkin for Councillor Johnson. There are no further substitutes being notified. Declarations of interest. Please can you indicate if you wish to declare an interest. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wish to do 2 for number 8, which I understand is now number 5. Is that I'm actually a member of the Wye Valley AOMB Joint Advisory Committee. It's just really putting it there. And for number 6, I have a proxy councillor because my partner works for the Woodland Trust and is a volunteer speaker for Ancient Woodlands. And over the last week, he has been supporting on behalf of Woodland Trust the applicants, not the applicants, the representatives, okay, the residents. Thank you.
Right. Are there any other declarations?
It does seem to be working. That's working, yes. Just confirmation, if I may, from our legal officer that I have been working in the past. I've worked heavily in the racing industry, both as a jockey and as a trainer, and also have built many riding arenas and gallops. And I want to confirm that I am not thereby debarred from speaking and voting on the issue concerning the racing stables.
I think the odds to that, Chairman, is no, unless, of course, the councillor is in any way connected to the applicant, who I think is based in Chippenham, isn't he, from recollection? But otherwise, if you've got no connection with the applicant or the landowner, you should be fine.
I have no connection with the applicant whatsoever, but I thought it wise to declare my previous involvement in the world of national hunt racing and for clarity, and not that anyone should think that I was perhaps hiding anything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Durkin, I believe.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for the sake of completeness, I too am a member of the AOMB Advisory Board, but this application at Woolhope is not in the AOMB itself.
Thank you. Any other?
Maybe I should just.
Yeah, I'm also a member of the Wye Valley AONC.
Yeah.
I don't think any of these microphones are working. Oh, no, this one
You will persevere, John.
is now.
Councillor Norman, did you?
It's it. It's it.
That one.
Keep your finger on
It's
it.
on, it's on. Yes, just really, I'm not sure it's necessary, but I have on and off over many years been a volunteer with the Woodland Trust. Not directly involved in this particular thing in any way.
No further declarations? Then we'll move on to the minutes of the meeting to confirm of the 10th of August, 2022. Yeah, 19, I'm still in the 19th, 18th century, 20th.
More likely the 18th century.
The 18th century, I suppose.
Good week, but
No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer.
I think we have.
I did send an email to all members of the committee, plus Matthew, with regards to the reasons for refusal for the Owl Hill application at Ross on Wye on page 21. It clearly states in here WALF1, whereas in the meeting it was WALF4 that Mr. Bishop actually highlighted and advised members to use as one of the reasons.
Mr. Bishop, perhaps you could.
I'm content if Councillor Harvey, because thank you for pointing that out for us. Thank you.
Okay, with that slight amendment, is it agreed? Sorry, Councillor Norman, do you
Sorry,
want to?
Chair. I thought there had been a letter of concern about the minutes. Did nobody else get this?
I've not received it.
An email. An email, yeah, sorry, email. I thought there was one. Yeah. And I think we're clear that the minutes are correct, as we all remember them, but I just do remember there was a discussion about the traffic issue. It was a very serious one. And I think perhaps they misunderstood that we'd actually included that in the actual recommendations at the end. But we certainly discussed it quite a lot of, quite a considerable way. And I think we often felt, most of us felt there should have been something there, but it's not there. So
It's not there.
As far as I'm
And you cannot subsequently add
no, fair enough.
additions to any recommendation. That would be subject to a judicial review.
No, totally understand that. I just think that may be where the misunderstanding came in.
Okay. Those in favour then? Of the minutes,
That's with the amendment.
to the amendment.
with the amendment, yeah. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Okay, that's been passed. Now, because of, I've been asked if we could change the order of the meeting today. Item 8, I've agreed that we could brought forward to the first part of the meeting. The parish council and the local member and the community have a meeting with the police on a matter of community interest at midday. And so in order to not substitute that particular important meeting, I've agreed that we bring item 8 to the beginning of the meeting. Item 8 will be the retrospective erection of new stables and turnout paddocks with associated works at Sapham's Farm, Woolhope, Hereford. Can I request that the public speakers present in person for the agenda item 8 join the meeting? Mr. Matt Slotherkin on behalf of Woolhope Parish Council and Mr. Jeremy Lloyd, local resident. Good morning, Mr. Slocum, Mr. Lloyd. I welcome you to the meeting and will call you to speak following the presentation on the application made by the officer. Mr. Lloyd will make the presentation.
Good morning, Chairman, Committee. Thank you, members, for the attendance at yesterday's site meeting. I trust the committee has noted the updates available in respect to the application before you. The application site is Sappers Farm Farnout, and is marked with a red star on the slide displayed. It is noted that the site is surrounded by properties, although not immediately adjacent, but within the vicinity. Running clockwise on the slide before you, indicated by blue stars, we have Sleeves Oak, Firs Farm, Grey Hill Farm, Whittlebury Farm, Sappers Cottage, Ashby House, Year Farm, and Hyde Farm. Next slide, please. The application before you is of retrospective nature and is for 11 new stables and turnout paddocks for the site. New stables are outlined in red on the left-hand side of the slide, and the turnout paddocks outlined in red on the right-hand side of the slide. The bottom slide shows the site from an aerial perspective. Next slide, please. The site as a whole is outlined in blue and covers approximately 206 acres. Next slide, please. Again, we see the various aspects of the application, i.e. stables and turnout pens have been highlighted in red. Next slide, please. This slide details the design of the stables. Next slide, please. And the next slide shows the finished stables. And finally, the next slide, please. The final two slides show the turnout pens. The site itself is an established racehorse training facility with a planning permission for the same granted in 2014. It appears that the consistent objection raised has been in respect of increased traffic serving the facility. A number of submissions were made, culminating in a revised traffic management plan submitted that was ultimately considered acceptable by the local authority's highway area engineer, subject to the submitted traffic management plan and its adherence, and adopted as a condition on any planning consent granted. In this regard, it is considered that subject to the conditions, the proposal satisfies Herefordshire Local Plan Core Strategy Policy FT1. In respect of ecology, it is noted that the consultation response, given the surface water and waste management utilised, that the development would have no likely significant effects on the River Wye, especially area of conservation, and the SSSI site of special scientific interest. Further consideration of the consultation response has been given in respect of site ecology with a number of conditions proposed, for example, wildlife boxes and restrictions on lighting. And in this respect is considered the proposal accords with the Herefordshire Local Plan Core Strategy Policy SD3 and SD4. Other concerns raised were the use and consumption of water by boreholes. In this respect, it is noted that the premises utilises a borehole which is licensed by the Environmental Agency. Other consultation responses received were Woodland Parish Council voted to support the application, and the Public Rights of Way Development Officer who offered no objection. Concerns raised and noted, however, having regard to the core strategy and responses received from consultees, together with the addition of the traffic management plan, the proposal is considered to accord with relevant policies and therefore is recommended to the committee for approval.
Thank you. I now invite the local representatives to Mr. Slocum, who speaks on behalf of the Parish Council. Mr. Slocum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Parish Council is a statutory consultee for this application and has followed the guidelines set out in the National Planning Policy Framework. One of the overarching objectives of the NPPF is economic growth. And to achieve this, it requires a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Specifically, the NPPF requires applications to be approved without delay unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. In line with this guidance, the Parish Council considered all aspects of the application and balanced the concerns of residents against the benefits. Objection to planning application should only be based on material planning considerations, and the main objection to the growth in the business of Satness locally has been in relation to the traffic, and as the officer has confirmed, there is now a plan in place with that regard. Within the parish, as throughout Herefordshire, there are many small lanes, and these are used by ever larger tractors and many farm-based vehicles. There are more heavy vehicles visiting local chicken houses, and the very nature of farm-based business within the parish will always involve vehicles using narrow lanes. We assure the local highways authority is in the best position to resolve that traffic management issue within the county. The benefits to the community of a successful and thriving business at Satness Farm are significant. The business is one of the largest employers in the area. It contributes to the local economy by providing business for local suppliers, veterinary services, and of course, hospitality industry, amongst others. Satness Farm is a great asset to the area. As you have seen from your visit yesterday, the quality of the development is high and does not have an adverse impact on the landscape. The footpaths through Satness Farm are popular with walkers, many of whom are attracted by the sight of racehorses being trained. Many residents of the parish have expressed a positive reaction to having a world-class equestrian facility in the parish, referring it to other types of business. Business attracts visitors to the areas as owners visit, and these in turn spend money locally. Herefordshire is extremely popular within the equestrian community because of its terrain and landscape and its proximity to prime national hunt venues. We do hope in that regard that the committee supports this application today to allow this prestigious business to grow and flourish with hopefully plenty more winners for us all. Many thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. And now I invite Mr. Lloyd, the resident speaker, in objection to the application.
Good morning and thank you. I feel I'm living in something of a parallel universe here. First of all, I want just to point out that when this development was half the size it is now, the parish council voted against it. And when the parish council met to consider it this time, it was deeply divided and it only carried its support due to the casting vote of the chairman.
Sorry, that's not true. I abstained.
That will be a matter of public record, and obviously I invite people to observe that. This is a beautiful and tranquil part of our county. That tranquility has been severely disrupted by these stables. They were originally consented to have 32 horses on this site. With this development, it will bring it up to over 60. And I just want to clarify that 11 stables actually equals 22 extra horses. Now, I know something about the impact of traffic, and there's an awful lot of claims in the advice you've received and the submissions by the applicant that this is having no effect on the surrounding area. When I moved there were no lorries on these roads. There were a few private cars. There are now, we counted 40 vehicles one day up our tiny lane, and I've lost count of the number of times I've had to go out and help HGV drivers who are stuck down our lane. These horses that your consent could allow generate a huge amount of traffic. They have to be delivered to the site at the beginning and the end of the season, and they have to be taken to race meetings throughout the racing season. And if you visited the site yesterday, I hope you were struck by the tranquility of the area. That is soon to be shattered when the racing season gets into full swing. The traffic management plan is an attempt to do something about it, but it's not really a realistic plan. It offers to encourage drivers to use things other than the narrow lanes. And to be honest with you, there aren't any other things than narrow lanes. And the applicant themselves said that they had tried to persuade the drivers not to use the no HGV lanes to no avail. The core strategy objectives are not just about commerce and employment, they're also about the environment and the quality of people's lives. This application fails at least on 2 counts. It fails to improve the health and well-being and quality of life of all the residents, and it fails to develop Herefordshire as a destination for quality leisure and tourism. People do not come to this area to look at lorries going up and down roads. What they do is they come here to enjoy the area of outstanding natural beauty, the ancient woodlands and the Hereford trails. I've seen these people forced into the hedgerows by these lorries that are completely unsuitable. This is creeping development.
You've had your 3 minutes.
Can I just conclude?
Conclude very briefly.
Okay, today you can make a real difference to preserving this precious landscape. I urge you to reject this application.
Thank you. And now I'd like to call on the local member, who is Councillor Barry Durkin. He speaks first and has the right to speak at the end of the debate. He does not have a vote. 10 minutes time limit. Councillor Durkin.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, councillors, that attended the site visit yesterday. I'm here today to speak against, as a local community, and I believe this is a further overdevelopment of an existing overdeveloped site in a rural location, which has caused detrimental damage to the environment and the lives of local residents, including beyond the parish of Woolhope. This is the National Hunt Stables, as you've heard, and as such, does not get into full flow until the season commences, which I believe is soon. Thus, the volume of work will increase from that quiet scene seen yesterday. Generally, I'm supportive of businesses in rural locations. However, they must not cause unacceptable adverse impact to the immediate nearby residents. That's an objective of the core strategy with regard to traffic management, environment and ecology and biodiversity. There is a history of retrospective applications of this, which this is another one of the list. In 2014-ish, stables were built for 32 racehorses and brood mares. In 2018, retrospectively, there were 12 further stables, then current horse levels not specified. And now there's a further retrospective for 22 stables. Current horse levels still not specified. So we've got the current number at 32 from the 2014 application. The officer report states that the site owners confirm that the additional facilities are not as a result of additional horses on site, and no additional horses are anticipated. Additional horses gauged against what number? Race horses and the brood mares of 2014 are on site now. Notwithstanding, why would capital be spent on constructing a further 22 stables, 11 blocks, for no further horses? The capital decision is, of course, a matter for the business. Officer report 653. The new stable design has taken into account existing buildings and incorporates materials utilised on site. Simply, the construction is different from existing buildings, and the material and thus does not incorporate materials already utilised on site. Officer report 4.2.3, natural environment and biodiversity. There is little to reflect on this in the report. There were previous concerns raised by an ecology officer in 2019 of Herefordshire Council at the start of the site conversion from agricultural equine. Remarks was made about significantly alter the character, and it was made by her, which in my opinion is still extant. But in the current report at Site Ecology, there is the informative to protect wildlife, stating if at any time protected species are found or suspected on site, a suitably experienced ecologist should be consulted. Nothing mentioned in the informative about found or suspected adjacent to the site. Under LD2, biodiversity and geodiversity, development proposals should conserve, restore and enhance the biodiversity and geodiversity assets of the Herefordshire or Herefordshire through retention and protection of native conservation and sites and habitats of important species. Again, the NPPES 2021 paragraph 8C says there is a requirement to protect and enhance our natural built historical environment. In the adjacent woodland, I am informed there are at least 7 species of bats. Now, forgive me, I'm not familiar with the name, but Bechstein bat. Other ones are lesser horseshoe, brown long-eared, common pipistrelle, and other species. Also, there are dark dormice in the nearby wood, which is being surveyed as part of the National Dormice Survey. Yet, nothing other than an informative is issued. Although protected species were known by Herefordshire Council back as far as 2013. Where is the review for ecology and biodiversity? Well, these animals are still hopefully there. Surely we can permit protected species to be disturbed or removed from their environment without appropriate investigation before decision. Further in the commentary, there was no residential properties in the immediate vicinity. Well, you've seen the answer now on that first slide. There are a number, all of which have impacted by the site. The officer informs that the principal use of the training resource has been established, agreed. But my concern is that the number of horses currently on site are causing issues because of traffic movement, water provision, biodiversity and ecology. The number of horses on site was circa 42 in 2014 at the initial application. I cannot see any current horse numbers mentioned in any report since 2014. So the horses have increased to probably beyond 60. However, currently it is considered that there are far more than this number on site, with additional stables being provided. There is an adverse effect and impact on the increased number of racehorses and brood mares, with effects on traffic movements, water supply, ecology and diversity. Could we limit the number of horses to that permitted in 2014 because of the cumulative impact as part of a requirement? Officer's report 610 concerns respecting possible water consumption on site. The site does have a borehole, yes. In addition, there was an off-site spring. The off-site spring, previously diverted, provided water for lunch water for the horses, and it's done so for some years, post 2014, and without approval. Following the successful application of a certificate of lawfulness, the water from the spring stream, now approved, continues to provide for the lunch walk. However, the same spring provides water to residences in the area, including the house on site. This spring being the only source of water for those local houses. Following ongoing water supply problems, one of these off-site homes has been forced to install their own borehole, and another has gone to supply for Welsh water at a cost of over £15,000. Supply from boreholes to more than 60 holes will potentially continue to have detrimental effects on the aquifers, supplying that site borehole. Also other boreholes in the area, and the off-site spring relied on by the remaining houses. However, with no accurate knowledge of the number of horses on site, what the effect on the water supply and water aquifers remains unknown as supply increases. Office report 6.63. This is the highway saving. It is in MPP paragraph 111, not 109. That's about overnight stage for lorries. Development should only be prevented on refusal on highway ground if there is an unacceptable impact on highway safety or a residual community impact on the road network will be severe. On this point, I disagree with the highways officer's view. You will note on the rural lanes yesterday, there are cars, vans, horse boxes with trailers, LGVs, HGVs, frequenting the site daily from 5 AM until late in the evening, 7 days a week, depending on racing activities, transporting horses to multiple destinations, and the requirement of the site operation, including client visits and staff attendances. These traffic movements include during the national hunt season, which is accepted by the highways officer as inadequate, based on the agreed site travel plan. As a site travel plan, requires access by one of the 3 routes in. So that is unacceptable, and the other 2 even more unacceptable, as you may have seen yesterday. It is often stated that currently there is a similar volume of traffic and size of vehicles that were attending the fruit farm when it was actually an agricultural enterprise. This is not feasible. There's currently high volumes and size of traffic serving the community, and its increased operations causing adverse impact. Residual cumulative impacts on the road network are there, and they would not have been encountered in 2013 for a fruit farm. Consultations, although the CPRE and AONB have expressed concerns about its application. In fact, far back, CPRE contacted in 2020. Both observations is that although it's not in the AONB, it is the gateway to the AONB and should be protected as that, as if it was a major development on the AONB. The CPRE also comments upon the complex and several rights of way as a section of the Hereford Trail runs above and to the east of the farm. The Ramble Association have also objected to the current 22 stables given location next to a public footpath. In conclusion, for information, some of the locals have had discussions with the owners of a French show jumping organisation in selling high quality sports horses, who confirmed that his family is moving to Settlers Farm with his corporate business numbers of horses not yet known. They're called Extra Chevaux. In its July Facebook page, it reports, "We're moving. Extra Chevaux is moving to England. This has a high potential to increase the number of horses on the site, the volume, the type and size of additional vehicles attending the site, will effectively provision support to local residents and the traffic management. But this is not for today, and perhaps not, that is probably what we require in planning permission. Can I one more thing, one more, if you can go, Chairman, please. An important number of the application is residents' well-being and quality of life, balanced against the needs and expansion of the rural business. The balance which has arguably deteriorated from the development of traffic, pollution, water sources, and ecological impacts, and a halt to be achieved to this perceived overdevelopment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jerkin. I have to say, well, it's not taking into account anything speculative as to what might or might happen in the future. That's irrelevant to this particular application. Right, I'll now invite. Could the speakers return to their seats, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I now invite debate. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. I just have some questions for the officer, please. Is that because of Herefordshire CPRE and Herefordshire Ramblers about the impact of the visual, why was there no landscape officer report? And I know that it's 300 metres away from the Wye Valley AONB, but it does have an impact. So that's question number one. Question number two is that I note that Herefordshire Council Public Rights of Way officer has no objection, but I think that the Herefordshire Ramblers report's actually quite telling, because they say that their initial desktop study said that they, didn't have an objection, but actually by going out there, recognise the impact on the Much Markle Ridge, W01, and this development had a severe detrimental visual impact. So I was just wondering, was the Public Rights of Way officer a desktop study or a site visit? Likewise with highways, if the narrow, is it all done by desktop or is it a site visit? Ecology, it's regrettable for me that we don't know the impact of actually of this development. But what confuses me, and the problem with a retrospective application, is that there's no preliminary ecology assessment. So the ecologist has asked had notes about bat flights and asked that bat flights for bats commuting, foraging and roosting are not affected, but we don't have any detail of bat flights in this application. So I'm just wondering where that evidence is. And my last question is, with the condition, what Councillor Durkin said, is there a possibility that we could put a condition on capacity around the number of horses, please?
Councillor, Mr. Bishop and Mr. Lloyd, I don't know which order. Mr. Lloyd, perhaps first.
Yeah, there was no consultation in terms of the landscape officer. The reason it was outside the AONB, and in terms of the, I can only advise the consultation responses in respect of the rights of way officers, the highways, ecology. The responses is as viewed.
What I'm asking is that the difference between a desktop study and a site visit, it makes it quite clear, even within the Herefordshire Ramblers, is that they recognise their visual impact by going. But if officers are doing desktop studies, how can they look at the visual impact? That's what I'm asking.
In terms of the public rights of way, the officer would have looked at whether there was any impact upon the right of way, not the visual intrusion that the Ramblers have looked at. So the public rights of way officer would have looked at, is the public right of way impacted in terms of, is it physically impacted? Not.
Okay.
And secondly, as regards the landscape officer, the officer would have taken on board the fact that the stables are grouped with the other buildings there. It's outside the AONB, And we don't normally, in that particular situation, we don't normally then consult with our landscape officer.
Okay, and Mr. Bishop, can I just ask you again about the bet flights? Is that if the ecologist has asked that bet community foraging and roosting are not disrupted, how do we know where the bet flights are without a bet flight survey being done?
He's asked for that in relation to no lighting or low lighting to be provided. That's the reason he's asked for that. He's asked for that specifically to ensure that a condition is imposed regarding the lighting of the facility, so as to protect that potential.
Okay, that's great. And as regards number of horses, are we able to condition?
That would be very difficult on, I would suggest, on 200 plus acres of land. Do we know the number of horses that
Not the exact.
there was was conditioned originally?
It wasn't conditioned.
There was no condition on it originally. I think you're almost trying to close a stable door after the horse is bolted on that particular issue. Sorry to use that terminology. A collective in this respect, you have a situation where you're looking at a relatively modest addition to the existing facility at Sapness. It's clearly regrettable that the application is retrospective, particularly the amount of work which has been undertaken. Quite clearly that planning permission is required. They are under our surveillance now, in terms of our enforcement team and the local residents. So if anything, if a digger stirs on site, I would suggest our officers will be there straight away, because we don't want this to happen again. Thank you.
Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. A bit late, I would think. That last comment from Mr. Bishop. Retrospective once again. I find it very, very frustrating and annoying that people seem to be able to get away with this endlessly. Really annoys me. Anyway, on this particular application, I have a number of concerns. The local members raised quite a few of them, and I echo some of his concerns, particularly the increase in traffic that's likely, the impact on the water system. That seems to me a real concern. We know that water is increasingly worrying across the board, and continued abstraction is inevitably going to have an impact on that provision in the area. So that bothers me very much indeed. You've heard about the impact on biodiversity in the area, and comments being made to that effect, which also concern me very much indeed. I may say it's also quite concerning not to have the applicant here to put their own position on this, but to actually have the parish council apparently promoting it. To me, that seems very odd, particularly when we gather that this is quite a divided community in terms of this particular application. And perhaps we should have heard a bit more about that on the side, although the local member has redressed that to some extent. So a lot of concerns have been raised. I share quite a few of them. And I think the biggest concern is that, certainly to me, this seems like overdevelopment, clearly overdevelopment. We applaud a successful business, great to have it here, and it is appropriate in many ways, rural and all the rest of it. But it's being overdone, it's being increased to a point where it becomes far more damaging than beneficial to anybody in the area, other than perhaps the applicants themselves. So I find it very difficult to see my way to supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just, this is a classic example, parish may be divided, but the majority actually voted one way as opposed to another. We have to take that into account. This is a clash that we have in Herefordshire in the future between those that have to make their living in the country and those that come to, as my dear friend David Nobbs, the author, wrote, those that come to die in the status quo. And that is always going to be a conflict. We've got Katie Jones from the Highways Department online, I believe. She wanted to say something or make a comment.
Hello. Hi, I'd just like to confirm that a site visit was undertaken for the application. And when coming to the conclusion that we had no objection subject to the traffic management plan, I think we had to also look at the use of the site that could potentially be available. For example, a farmer could take on the site and have land elsewhere, which involves travelling in large sort of tractors and other large vehicles to often sort of land further away from the site. So we had to make a comparison between what is proposed in this application and the potential the site could actually generate. And that's where we decided that the traffic management plan was a suitable route in order to try and mitigate and reduce the impact that any traffic from the site would have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I now, other speakers, I've got, only have indicated, Councillor Fagan.
Thank you, Chair. And unfortunately, this application looks like it's making a laughing stock of the planning system, and it is very hard to understand why anybody would imagine that they have to go through the planning system looking at this, the history here. And you know, Mr. Bishop says that they're on the radar now. Well, actually, they should have been on the radar for a very, very long time. What I would like to know is, it's very hard to make a decision on this apart from the sort of gut feeling that this is blatantly wrong. This is no way to run a planning system. But I would like to know about the undischarged conditions on the previous application. 2018, there's condition 3 approved, condition 4 not discharged, ongoing. So I'd like to know what that condition is, please. Also, difficult to make any judgment on the ecology because there's nothing to go on. And if any ordinary planning application would have had to go through a very thorough ecological process, whereas this is obviously undermined that process. And so what I would really like is to actually have a proper ecological report on the surrounding area and what the impact of the development would be on the ecology of the area, because it's absolutely intrinsic to this site. Also, the impact on the water system. There's no information here in terms of what the impact is on the water system. And that seems to be a key feature within every planning application. What is happening in terms of water and waste as well? If we've got an increase in number of horses and we don't know how many horses are here, what about the manure management of that? So I'm finding it huge gaps in the information here on which I am sort of being asked to make a judgment. Thank you.
Mr. Bishop, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, the applicant's agents confirmed that the manure is spread on the applicant's land. I understand the applicant's got 206 acres and he spreads it on that land to improve that land. Some of it does go off-site to some neighbouring farms, according to his agent, but the majority is spread on the land, and that's it within your update sheets today. It feels like you say that they're making a mockery of planning, but they're not, because they've made the application. They are here to be considered today. If members are minded to refuse the application, then no doubt they will appeal, and no doubt the council will have then to consider issue enforcement notices as well. So those are the steps that we would take. The fact that it's there doesn't mean that it's an automatic approval is granted. It goes through all the various consultation responses, the various consultations, and reviewed accordingly. It's not an automatic approval. And they've made the application. They've made it on the requirements that are there for you to consider today.
Mr. Bishop, what is the condition not discharged from 2018?
The condition not discharged relates to a building elsewhere on the complex where a foul drainage was installed. And they are at the present, they submitted a proposal for that, which was unacceptable. And they are working with the officers to overcome that with a revised system.
Councillor Watson again.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. I just wanted to pick up what Katie Jones just said first, was that we talk about not speculating on what might happen in the future, about it being owned by farmers, you know, and so we got told in the previous is that not to speculate. So I just thought that, yeah, we can only deal with what we're dealing with now. I'd like to actually propose that we defer this application and ask that a landscape report is done, that the applicant does a full ecology report with bat flights, because it is a really important ecology. And actually with the manure, I thought that was a really good point, is that with the waste management and the impact of surface runoff on the local watercourses. So they're the three defers. So that's why I asked for a deferral and have those reports, please.
Right. Is that seconded?
Yes, I'd like to second, but is it possible to add an hydrology survey, please?
Well, we'll come to that when we just take a few more speakers first. We have a proposal for deferment. Councillor Rowe, Vice Chair.
I think my mic working
Yeah.
here, really?
Yes.
That's good, it's really good. I always sit with two hats, I'm afraid. I have this little argument in my head when I read the docs, and it hasn't been any different with this one. I think we must consider that if we'd had this application as it should have been, that is not retrospective, what would our decision have been? There would possibly be more in-depth documents, but I'm assured that a retrospective application is dealt with in exactly the same way as a day one fresh application. So and that's how it is. I can't help thinking though that in terms of the ecological report, standing there and looking at the site and taking it afresh without those buildings there may have thrown up an awful lot more information which we could have then considered. What does bother me and what is sitting in my head and arguing is we were stood there yesterday on that very large concrete pad on that huge bund that the stabling is sat on. And I wondered what that field, what that area would have looked like before, and most importantly, what materials were used in building up that bund, what is actually in it. It stood very high, and this is the problem. If we'd have stood there before in a beautiful green field and we thought, you know, it's a rural enterprise, maybe so, but that's the other part of the argument going on, is that, you know, it is a rural enterprise. It is a high value business, and that sort of business already exists in Herefordshire, and Herefordshire is becoming very well known for it. Sort of that not necessarily top end, but knocking on the door of the top end stabling and racing market. And if not Herefordshire, then where? Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any other speakers? Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is, how shall we say, interesting in the sort of Chinese way of being interesting, I think. And of course, you have to recognise that the major part of the buildings have been there for some years, and that is not contested, I believe, at all. I think the traffic management is a major problem. It's very easy to make a traffic management scheme. To actually make it work is much more difficult. And whatever you do, there are small lanes you're going in with large horse boxes. And you get small horse boxes as well, of course, for transit size ones. But you can't, I don't think, compel them to have all movement in for transit size horse boxes. Biodiversity, yes, it'd be interesting to find more about that. The woodland, though, is completely on the other side of the road and nothing to do with the actual stables themselves, except that I suppose there's the light impact and everything else, but we need perhaps to have more information on that. Water usage, yes. Racehorse, well, any horse of any size can drink up to 12 gallons of water a day. So there's a fair bit of water going down horses' throats. And the same with cattle, for that matter, too, I believe. And our local farmers can no doubt tell us about that too. So I think we ought to perhaps ignore the undischarged undischarged conditions, because that's being followed up now. It is, as always, a source of extreme concern to any planning committee that we have all these retrospective applications. It is unfortunate, I think. And it only takes a phone call to the planning department to find out if you need to make an application or not, or talk to your local councillor. Do we have planning reasons, sufficient planning reasons, good, sound, substantial planning reasons to refuse this? Because if we haven't, we'll get turned down at appeal very rapidly. So I'd like perhaps a bit of advice on that from Mr. Bishop.
Can I just remind members, I've done it many times, and before I was chairman of this, that to cite the fact that it is a retrospective application in any way affects your decision will lead you into grave difficulties, because the law is and has been that you must put aside that completely. And if you state at a meeting that you are look on this with disapproval because it is retrospective, then law would say that you should not be able to vote. And that is the law. And that changed about 40 years ago, I think. I seem to remember. I think in the early 80s, I think, if I remember.
Mr. Chairman, I was in no way suggesting we should take that into account at all. I'm just stating that it always causes more problems for planning committees and such, and the local residents when it's retrospective. But we should have an open mind and consider all the matters. But I am concerned, if people choose to vote against this application, are there sufficient planning reasons, good planning reasons, solid planning reasons voting against it? I'd like advice from our planner, please.
Bishop.
Well, you have in the report there, you have the comments from the main, or one of the main reasons being promoted by the committee is on the traffic impact, and you have the comments from the highways officer concerning that they do not consider the matter severe, and with the traffic management plan that overcomes the matter from their perspective. Councillor Watson has put forward reasons for deferral. I'm happy to take that back, take it back to the applicants and ask them to submit those additional information. The ecology report is essentially a BAT report. I don't for that to be undertaken, and for the manure management and the more detail on the manure management plan, and also aspects relating to the hydraulic aspects. We can ask them for that information. If they decide not to come forward, or they decide to appeal against non-determination, that's within their remit.
Councillor Hardwick.
We've had a proposal on the second of deferment. Isn't it normal policy that we stop the debate and take that to the vote?
No, sometimes there needs to be a full debate before we debate the code. Councillor Watson, do you want to come back?
Yes, please. Yeah, sorry, I've hit my microphone all the time. For me, I need that evidence and that assurance that, from a landscape, from the ecology and the hydrology to make my decision. And I think that evidence and it's worth it. Yeah, so thank you.
Right. As I've got no further indications of speakers, can I go to a vote? We have the deferrals. Oh, Councillor Durkin, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may, Chairman, I'll answer some of the questions that have been put out there. I think that in my report, I have focused on planning reasons with the water, with the ecology, and with the traffic management. The collection of buildings, in my opinion, is invasive. It's over.
Sorry, Councillor Durkin. As we're not making a decision deferral, I don't think there's need for you to sum up. If we're going to make a decision, yes, we'll do so.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I now have those in favour of a deferral as outlined by Councillor Watson's motion? Against? Abstentions? Then that is carried.
Sure.
So,
If I may, Chairman, could I ask specifically what the deferral covers?
somewhere?
Covers a request from the committee for, sorry, a request from the committee for a full ecological report to be submitted, a manure management plan, hydrological survey, and a landscape officer assessment as well.
What was the second? What was the second one? Sorry.
A manure management plan.
Yeah. Do you has that been included with a review of the highways?
No. I'm afraid we passed the motion, so we can't.
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm just clarifying.
We're going back, like we had earlier in the debate, where someone wanted to add it.
I want the clarity, so that's
Yeah,
it.
okay. Can we now have a 10-minute break while people? It's the live stream. Thank you. Can I request, welcome back, can I request that the speakers in person for this item, Ms. Lindsay McKenna, on behalf of local residents, and Mr. Gavin John Hamilton, agent, please take their seats in the public tables.
Chair, could I be excused, please, because I have declared an interest.
Okay, Councillor Watson now will leave the meeting. She has declared an interest in this particular item. Good morning, and I will call you when the officer has made their presentation to make your representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to pocket of woodland known as Hengrove and Warm Hill and Hengrove woodland. The proposal is to change the use of an existing forestry shed into a hard standing area from forestry for mixed use of forestry and forestry related light industry, as well as timber-based craft workshops. The site lies deeply to the south of Ross Eye. The woodland at Warm Hill and Hengrove is a plantation on an ancient woodland site, and it's also designated as a local wildlife site. There is existing access to the woodland from the public highway. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so that slide outlines the wider holding with the blue edge and the site of the proposed change of use in the red line there. We can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so the top slide shows you the main sort of application site in the red edge. The second smaller polygon, I believe, was indicated for parking purposes. Essentially, we are dealing with a change of use application. There is an existing commercial forestry enterprise within the woodland with a felling licence until July 2028. The woodland is also subject to a management plan that's agreed with Forestry Commission. Just in terms of the lower sort of aerial image, there is a small clearing you might be able to make out in the centre of that woodland, which is the area we're dealing with. If we can go on to the next slide, please. Okay, this plan really just indicates the existing site really. So you've got the forestry shed at the bottom right there really. That was approved under a prior notification a number of years ago under what we call deemed consent. The access track obviously, and then an area for storing wood prior to collection and being transported up the site, and an associated hard standing and turning area for lorries. Just to sort of clarify the nature of the proposed use, that has been sort of refined as part of the application process to sort of more tightly define the nature of what would be going on here. So it's essentially woodcraft activity in a workshop largely related to woodland products, either using hand or low-powered tools and machinery. Associated with that, there would be teaching and courses related to woodland crafts and associated activities. In terms of the noise management plan submitted, this indicates the use of the building limited to a maximum of 12 people, around up to 10 cars at any one time. Whilst all this would be an all-year-round activity, and indeed that's attracted some concerns from locals, as opposed to the more limited duration of forestry operations. We have had a comment from our environmental health officer, which has returned no objection subject to conditions. So I would refer members to conditions 3 and 4, which are on page 39. So that condition 3 talks about restriction of the use to forestry related light industry and timber-based craft workshops, and also yeah, so essentially that falls within classes E, G, and class F1. So we propose to limit the use. In terms of condition 4, that relates to noise, any noise generating plant and equipment, and that would be restricted to hours of between 8 AM to 6 PM Monday to Saturday, and only any noise generating activity only to take place within a fully enclosed part of the building. Obviously, we can't seek to restrict the existing forestry operations as part of that condition, so that's made quite explicit. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so that is essentially a drainage plan that was requested by our ecologists to satisfy habitat regulation purposes. So it just indicates an area for a drainage soakaway to deal with the water from the existing septic tank. So the response that followed from that is that the effects on the water quality in the area are acceptable, and an appropriate assessment has been carried out. I would stress that the building you see on the plan is lawful. This is purely for change of use, so we're not considering retention of the building. That is lawful for planning purposes. The only building operation, as I say, would be the construction of that drainage soakaway field. On to the next slide, please. Okay, so top left, you can see the existing forestry operation in terms of collecting wood to take away from the woodland. Top right is the building in question with the lean-to on the side there. And the bottom two give you a sort of different perspectives of the yard associated with that. But obviously it's a pocket within the woodland, as you can see. Next slide, please. Recommendation is for approval of the application, subject to conditions as set out in the report. I would stress we've had no objections from the technical consultees, including environmental health, our ecologist, and our highway engineer. There's also been Parish Council support on the basis of the revised proposal. The final point I'd like to make is obviously we've got to assess this application on the basis of the proposals submitted without speculating on any future use or intentions. The proposal is before us and when we can't deviate from that. I'm happy to answer any questions as they arise.
Thank you. And can I now invite Ms. McKenna to make her presentation?
I'll switch my mic on first. Thank you. This application is incorrectly presented as a small change of use decision, and it is not. The application site is set in an irreplaceable ancient woodland, a designated Herefordshire local wildlife site, and is at the heart of a tranquil hamlet. The applicant has failed to acknowledge the special status of this site. NPPF paragraph 180C states, development resulting in the loss or deterioration of irreplaceable habitats, such as ancient woodland, should be refused unless there are wholly exceptional reasons. This application is primarily about relocating existing light industry from local industrial estates into an ancient woodland to create a tenancy income for a London-based landowner. The occasional woodcraft courses mentioned are not unique and they are widely available in this county. Plonking light industry into ancient woodland does not even start to constitute a wholly exceptional reason. Footnote 63 of the NPPF 180C examples wholly exceptional reasons as infrastructure projects or where public benefit outweighs loss or deterioration of habitat. There are 16 registered objections, not a single resident in favour. The HCPRE have registered their objection. Likewise, the Forestry Commission, Woodland Trust and Wildlife Trust have all registered concerns about the negative impact of this development. They've quoted NPPF 180C, LD2, SS6 and SD4. The latest ecology report refers to woodland, not ancient woodland, which has different standards of assessment. It only addresses the immediate site area. The industrial light noise they're introducing and light, human presence and pollutants will have a far wider incursion into these woods. The ecology states there must be no objection from natural England. This condition has not been met. This significant intensification of use of an ancient woodland, you go from 4 people max to 12 daily, 300% increase. Vehicles from 4 to 10 daily, 250% increase. These exclude industrial site workers, deliveries, services, and visitors on their undefined open public days. Deep Dean is a tranquil, nature-rich valley enjoyed by residents, cyclists, horse riders, walkers, and tourists, including my own animal rescue site of 180 animals, including 5 lions and numerous monkeys. Also 2 holiday businesses adjacent to the application site whose offering is dependent on this tranquility. If permitted, the industrial activity will cut through this tranquility and become the overriding noise of this valley and the woodland. The effect on local residents is already felt. Extensive open bullying and intimidation towards residents.
I'm afraid you passed your 3 minutes.
Can I just do my last sentence, please?
Okay, last sentence.
The right say there's been a lot of intimidation and the original presenter of this has backed out as a result of that. The right decision is to refuse this application. Protecting, enhancing and conserving nature-rich Herefordshire happens one decision at a time. Please refuse this one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I now ask Mr. Hamilton, the agent?
Yes, good morning. This is a very specific application related just to forestry and timber. Yes, the wood is designated as planting on an ancient woodland site, though 90% was planted 50 to 60 years ago as a commercial timber crop. It's a working wood, albeit with existing management for biodiversity and ecology, with long-standing links to the Forestry Commission, Natural England, and several naturalist groups. At yesterday's meeting, which was quite surprising, with the active ward member giving an opinion on the application to the committee, I'd like to remind him that this application has been supported with conditions by Herefordshire Council, by Walford Parish Council, and with no objections by any consultees. And it's 1 million miles away from an industrial unit and absolutely no threat to any local business. 36 representations, of which maybe 23 could be called objections. So is that a groundswell of local opinion? Well, no, 8 objections from Deepdean Cottage and 4 from Paddock's Farm, where you saw the placards yesterday, more than 50% from just 2 households. There's been a very focused campaign with intense canvassing over 9 months by a small number of people. Multiple objections running to several pages by the same few people. Much of the concern speculates on the effect of the change of use of the woodland. Yet the Habitat Regulation Assessment, which covers all environmental aspects, including drainage, ecology, which was published recently by Herefordshire Council, and which references all the relevant legislation, concludes that there will be no adverse effects on the woodland or the special area for conservation subject to mitigation. Noise and traffic. It is a low-key, low-tech proposal hidden hundreds of meters inside a working wood in an existing building that has been in use related to forestry and timber, with all that that implies, for over 40 years. Some have focused on the word industry without the heavily qualifying, highly specific timber-related and woodland crafts light industry. Where else would you find timber woodland crafts except in a woodland? A small number of people have made suppositions way beyond this application, and there is a rumour mill. There's going to be a hotel. The wood will be some sort of hippie commune. Nothing of the sort. This has never been contemplated, could and would never happen, and has nothing whatsoever to do with this application.
Thank you. Can you now please take your seats back in the gallery, please? I know Councillor Watson, the local member, has declared an interest in this agreement. She has nominated Councillor Wilding to represent her in this as the local member. Councillor Wilding, you'll have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to everyone that came to the site visit yesterday. I just wanted to remind everyone of how peaceful and tranquil that site was. There are a number of businesses in that area that rely on that peaceful environment to operate. If you approve this application, that tranquility and businesses will be lost. There are 2 holiday businesses within earshot. One of them has been, as you've heard, runs an animal rescue centre. I went and visited that yesterday after the site visit, and I have to say it is an astonishing place. But it is supported by finance from their 4 on-site holiday units, which allow visitors to have a unique experience in Herefordshire. And this change of use will threaten that, will threaten their ability to offer those tranquil holidays. The application masks the industrial nature of the planned change of use behind the idea that this will involve education and craft. But picture the site we were on yesterday. It was dominated by a large wooden structure, destined to be some kind of massive summer house, I guess. And while I do not deny the merits of the design, I think you must agree that it was a major piece of construction, the creation of which would require heavy-duty wood cutting and processing. At the moment, the site has a forestry business, which is straightforward felling and logging, but that activity only occurs for a small part of the year. This new business would operate all year round. That will destroy local tourism business and seriously affect the natural environment, because not only will there be more noise, but a major increase in human activity. The application suggests a full-time woodworking business as well as regular courses and teaching sessions. There is a suggestion that being near the wood, where the wood is grown, will make the business more sustainable, but people still have to travel there to work and the wood still has to be shipped out. The application paints a picture of low-scale business from the site with classes on wood carving, etc. However, the existing businesses which have expressed an interest in moving there, and I've looked at their websites, I see, for instance, make very large dining tables. the need for heavy duty machinery like bandsaws to cut the wood will definitely be there. And as we know, it's not the electric saw that makes the noise, it's the sound of the saw ripping through the wood. They say the machinery will be inside and soundproof, but how likely is it, without constant policing of that site, that in warm summer months, workers will keep the windows and doors closed? Picture again that large summer house construction. Make no mistake, the main purpose of this change of use is to create an industrial unit. Its aim will be to produce as much product as possible and to expand its operations as much as it can. This is not a business that should be in this location. It should be located where it is best suited, where it is at the moment, in industrial units in Ross and Wye and Hereford, not moved to one of our precious wildlife habitats. The NPPF paragraph 180 states, development resulting in the loss or deterioration of irreplaceable habitats, such as ancient woodland, should be refused unless there are wholly exceptional reasons. And these reasons are defined as national significant infrastructure projects where the public benefit would clearly outweigh the loss of the habitat. There is no exceptional reason for the development in this location, and as such, this development should be refused because it does not comply with national planning policy. Yesterday, members asked about the trees on the site. They asked if it actually could be an ancient woodland while it had the new conifers, etc. on it. I've got a definition of the ancient woodland here from the Woodland Trust, and it says this is only partly to do with the trees, which is why a plantation ancient woodland site can also be an ancient woodland. It is about the woodland as a whole ancient ecosystem. So it's not just about the trees, it's about the soil and the earth below it. It's about the flora and fauna, and especially what goes on underneath the soil. Ancient woods are areas of woodland that have been persisted since 1600 in England. They are unique and complex communities of plants, fungi, insects, and other microbial organisms. So we're really concerned about the following impacts of the intensification of the activity of humans, the disturbance and displacement of mammals and birds, and damage to the ancient woodland ecosystems. Noise, light and dust occurring from the workshop buildings. According to Hereford Council's own environmental report, which says that it is a special wildlife site, they did point out that there was no certainty that the proposed development would not harm local protected species. Part of the reason for that is that that report was focusing around the building area. And of course, as we know, that building has just been put up over the last 3 years. So obviously all the wildlife has disappeared from the immediate area. That's why there's no record of it. Walford's NDP only supports proposals which result in a net gain of biodiversity. I don't think they agree that this is good. So we've got policy RA5, the proposal should be compatible with neighbouring uses and not cause undue environmental impacts. Well, that's not true. It's not compatible with the neighbouring tourism and it will cause undue environmental impacts. RA6, planning applications will be permitted where they ensure the development is of a scale which would be commensurate with its location and setting. I don't believe it satisfies that with, as the stated, the 300% increase in personnel and the large increase in traffic. We have policy LD2, the retention and protection of nature conservation sites. It doesn't do that. LD3, protection and retention of existing green infrastructure, doesn't do that. Policy E4, Herefordshire will be promoted as a destination for quality leisure visits and sustainable tourism by utilising and enhancing the country's unique environmental heritage assets. It doesn't do that. Policy SS1, development proposal should conserve and enhance environmental assets. Again, I don't think it does. So in summing up, this is an unwelcome, unnecessary, totally inappropriate increase in industrialisation, which will decrease biodiversity, threaten the future of ancient woodland, badly affect existing tourism businesses in the area, and cause disturbance to those living by it. Thanks, Chair.
Right. Councillor, I believe I've got one. Well, I'll start the debate. Councillor Durkin.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Just a clarification, really. On the title of the report, it mentions from a forestry-related light industry. Can the officer assist me with what he considers to be in his report, light industry in the forestry?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the noise management plan that's been submitted, essentially it's craft related woodwork. So it's specifically using woodland from timber from the woodland in the manufacture of products. Obviously, you are limited in terms of scale by the size of the building and the yard, and there's a condition that specifically addresses that. I have to say I had initial reservations as Councillor Wilding has put to us in terms of the location of development when I set out on this application many months ago. However, having refined that proposal description, having the support of a condition to be able to enforce that, and having listened to the technical consultee responses, highways, ecology, environmental health, I struggle to find a substantive reason why we should refuse planning permission for the proposal.
Can I do a follow-up, Chairman? Thank you for that explanation. Could you point me in your report? Forgive me, I'm standing in today. I haven't had the opportunity to read this. Where in your report you clarify this term, light industry?
16.
I think under the section of noise nuisance, there is a paragraph there, 618, 624 deals with noise nuisance in terms of the type of activity. So
I'm primarily looking at scale. Sorry.
Scale, in terms of scale, yeah, we can't necessarily limit it to a certain size of product, or it is light industry, which is an activity that can be carried out in a residential area without causing nuisance. In terms of, I'm just trying to qualify your concern. Is it that the size of what might be produced, or
it's been mentioned by the ward member on the website? Apparently, constructing dining tables. Is that what you would consider to be light forestry work? What I'm trying to ascertain is how big is big.
Yeah,
in planning terms.
Yeah, I think we're dictated by the size of the building, really, in terms of what could be manufactured there. Clearly, we're not, building structures for houses here. It will be more small scale, dictated to, as I say, by the size of the building and the fact that we're saying that to use that machinery, etc., for this activity should be within the building. That's what the conditions tells us, and that's what's recommended by environmental health.
Okay, thank you. You made it slightly more. That's okay.
Can I just say, I've always looked upon light industry as something you can construct in your garden shed. I think you could construct a dining table, and I know of someone who has done that. But anyway, that's by the by. But that's it.
No, I understand that. Thank you.
Councillor Fagan.
Thank you. Well, one of my questions is that there is a license, the current felling license is for 3,000 tons of timber. I believe 1,500 have already been extracted. So there's another, you know, half of the license up until 2028 has been extracted. So is there a time limit to, would we be putting a time limit, the same time limit on this planning permission if it were granted, or the same? I think what I'm trying to get at is there a likelihood that once the other 1,500 tons have been extracted, that the industry could continue on this site, in which case timber would sort of be imported? So I'm slightly unclear about that. And also I wanted to find out, you know, is there a process of restoration, a plan about the restoration of this piece of woodland? Because according to the Woodland Trust, you know, they're saying no loss of all losses in ancient woodland area are unacceptable, including development of hard infrastructure, especially in small woods where it has a disproportional impact. So I would class this as a small wood, and just looking at the impact of any development on that piece of wood, wondering, is there a restoration plan, and is that something that we could potentially condition that the applicant work with the Woodland Trust to develop a restoration plan?
Mr. Reid.
Yes, thank you. In terms of the importation of timber, the current felling license is to July 2028, but that's not to say that another license won't be granted. Obviously, there are time limited felling licenses with a certain quantity of timber to be extracted. But as I say, that could be further license could be granted beyond that. So that's not to say that that is it once it reaches. And obviously, there is a management plan which is agreed with Forestry Commission, with an appropriate body to govern that, and obviously there is replanting to restock the woodland, etc. So I don't think that the supply of wood is a concern. In terms of loss or deterioration of the ancient woodland, and obviously this is a plantation on ancient woodland site. The policy wording is, as I say, loss or deterioration. Now we've got a response from our ecologist which says that there aren't such effects in terms of adverse impacts on protected species or on the water quality, etc., through the habitat process. So again, on that point, I'm struggling to identify what we could cite in terms of harm, given the conditions you've got in terms of controlling lighting, noise, what we could actually cite in terms of what is the harm of this change of use. And on that basis, I don't believe there is a breach of that national policy in terms of citing the business in the ancient woodland.
Can I just say, from my knowledge, that the forestry, the plan, as it were, that the Forestry Commission will accept is subject to ongoing long-term plan, that the forest is regenerated continuously. When you take it out, you will have to have proven that you've regenerated those areas and sufficient forestry is replaced that you've taken out, planting in planting concern. And if they apply for a license for further felling further on, it'll be subject to the fact that they have replaced those particular trees that they've taken out and improved the actual area. And I understand usually it's now, unlike in the past, emphasis is put on the indigenous trees as opposed to some of the imported pines and etc. that have been planted in the past. Councillor Andrews.
There we are, it's actually working. Thank you, Chairman. Well, much has been made of quite an ancient woodland, but I must say what much of which we saw on the visit was a conifer which appeared to have been planted within the last 40 or 50 years. Now, I understand that I've got this right, have I not, that any industrial activity, as it like to be called, furniture making or dining room tables, chairs, would be confined to within the the building that we visited. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
So what was then the rather nice archway of wood that was on site outside? Would that sort of work still continue?
I think the condition as worded restricts the use of the use of machinery and tools within the building. But I suppose in terms of what use of the yard, that could be used for storage if appropriate to the product, as you saw, I guess.
And so they plan to have woodwork classes as well, which seems to be an estimable activity. I understand also, we were told yesterday that Pontrilas Timber come and collect felled logs. Is that right? That's correct, isn't
Yeah,
it?
they do. That's what I witnessed myself on my site visit
Well,
6 months ago. Yeah.
Pontrilas timber wagons are usually very substantial vehicles, as those of us who don't see them driving around would realise. I must say, this seems to me to be a rather worthwhile activity, and I'm happy to move the recommendation for approval.
Has that been seconded?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Oh, yeah, okay. Councillor Norman.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to the site visit, which I regret very much because it really does help if you're able to be on the site and to actually see the place that we're discussing. That couldn't be helped. I feel very confused over this, I really must say. I mean, I absolutely take on board the concerns that's been raised, and I very much respect the views of the people who express those concerns, Woodland Trust and Wildlife Trust and so on. And, you know, would share very much the concerns that they express about this application. But as Councillor Andrews has said, on the face of it, this particular application looks to be for activity that's making far less of an impact on the site in question, and I'd have thought also on local residents as well. I mean, it's very much the way you perceive an application and the wording, of course I understand that, but having seen some of the pictures of those massive great lorries and the churned up mud and all the rest of it, it's a pretty horrifying picture actually, although that is what timber extraction does involve, unless you're bringing on horses, and then it's a bit less impactful. We did have that in our local wood near Leicester recently, which was wonderful. But we are where we are. But it seems to me that training and workshops and all these things are to be encouraged and supported. So I feel quite confused. I mean, I'm aware of woodlands in different parts of the county where there are, you know, green woodworking, chair making, all sorts of skills development and sharing those skills, so training sessions as well, which, as far as I know, have very little, raise very little concern in the area where this is all happening. So I am confused. One side of me very unhappy about the proposed damage and the concerns that have been raised on that one, but also quite sympathetic to what I would have thought was an improvement on what has been happening there already. So I'm going to have to think about this a little bit, but just one quick comment to say that I absolutely understand about the ancient woodland aspect. It can be covered with conifers and still be an ancient woodland site with all that means in terms of the soil, as we've heard, and the undergrowth and all those other things. And possibly one final clarification would help. We had it raised earlier by the chairman, and that is the replanting. Did I understand that some of the replanting at least is going to be broadleaf rather than conifer, or is it always likely to be conifer in the future?
Yeah, the management plan does refer to broadleaf replacement. Yeah.
Right, so that's a gradual, ongoing future thing to replace with.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the restoration is part of the objectives of that plan.
That's encouraging. So
Can I say, yeah, I think that is the important development that has happened over the last, I don't know how many years, that the management plans now include far more regeneration and turning those woodlands back into what they were originally, which is to be applauded by the Forestry Commission and the powers that be.
absolutely. Sorry, just one more final clarification, if I could. That is an ongoing plan. Is that regardless of whether this application replaces what's going on there at the moment? Yes. It is. Okay, so that's sort of in a way beside what's proposed. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have an objection, a standing objection from Natural England, whatever they like to call themselves now,
No, we've got, we are awaiting a response to the HRA, which was undertaken, but we've got no standing objection on.
Do we have objections from any of the consultees, like of that particular nature?
Yeah, just to qualify on that, to England, they haven't replied within the period of time that we give them on the HRA opinion from our, so we can determine the application now.
Right, and the Woodland Trust?
The three parties that did express some concern, I made a note earlier. So there were concerns from the CPRE, Campaign for Protection of Rural England, Woodland Trust, and the Heritage and Wildlife Trust. Those are the three sort of bodies that did. I think the Forestry Commission gave us a very standardised, non-bespoke answer. Yeah, there were some concerns from those.
There were concerns rather than objections, or do concerns act as objections?
I have to look back through each individual one to give you the.
I think that's important too, to get that straight.
So Wildlife Trust say it would like to express its concern as the headline figure there. So originally the Woodland Trust said we did assess these proposals but have no comment to make. And then they, after a short period of time, they all decided they did want to make comments and express concerns. And then the Campaign for Protection of Rural England. Yeah, as drafted in its report, it's our concerns is the possible damage to the sensitive site through the intensification of the use. So that they've been phrased as concerns to my understanding.
Thank you. It's interesting. Yes, I do believe that the Forestry Commission's policy nowadays is to have mixed broadleaf woodland as a replacement for whatever's been taken away. And yes, I mean, I've read quite a lot of books about what happens in woodlands, especially as far as what goes on underground, which is actually quite fascinating, extraordinary communication system. But these trees, most basically, as Councillor Andrew said, have only been there really probably 40 or 50 years. So I understand it's still classified as an ancient woodland site because it was replacing an ancient woodland. It leaves in a sort of slightly strange position in many ways. As far as the workshop goes, I think if we are going to be absolutely sure that the neighbours are not disturbed, we've got to make very sure that noise prevention or attenuation is of a very high standard and it is complied with, which means keeping doors and windows shut, I believe. You may need some form of dust extraction and such. But if you're going to be keeping the noise in, you need an insulated building, and it needs to be also kept in the condition where it is performing its duties of noise attenuation. Is that building suitably insulated and ventilated that it can do that?
That hasn't been a recommendation to upgrade the fabric from our environmental health officer. As I say, the condition that's come through has been imposed at condition 4. And if you want to see the comments of the EHO, there at paragraph 4.4 of the report. And I suppose just to flag up in that sense, it says the proposal is not likely to be intrusive. In that sense, it falls within the planning practice guidance for noise exposure hierarchy, that any noise will either be no observed as adverse effect level or lowest observed adverse effect level. Former requiring no specific mitigation measures, and the latter mitigate and reduce to a minimum. So that therefore should recommend a condition for operating hours for noise generating plant equipment.
Has there been problems there? Have there been problems there in the past that might lead us to have concerns about any future operations there? We give permission.
I haven't been made aware as part of the application process from our EHO of complaints, so I couldn't expand any further than that.
Right. And the piece of equipment we saw out in the yard outside the building, which I think may have been some form of handsaw or saw, am I right?
Yeah, but that's used in conjunction with the existing forestry work.
Yeah. So that's permitted.
Yeah. So I think the point is, in terms of that, there might be more likelihood for more significant noise as part of the existing commercial or forestry operation. But I suppose the point is that is more limited in duration, whereas the proposed use, light industrial, would be more all year round. But in terms of that potential for noise and disturbance, you're more likely to get it during those periods of the forestry where you've got lots of trucks coming in and out, heavy, proper heavy goods vehicles, and the use of that more industrial equipment, I guess.
But that's the only piece of industrial equipment that's likely to be used out there.
Yeah, in terms of the condition for restricting the activity we're considering today,
yes,
that's to be limited to low powered machinery and hand tools, and it's got to be within that building as opposed to used outside.
And the doors kept shut and the windows kept shut, so the noise attenuation is at its maximum.
Yeah, condition is worded in that way, but it says that the doors have to be shut. No, it's not. The recommendation didn't go that far.
Should it go that far?
Well,
otherwise noise will come out in a big way, won't it?
Can I just say that the main largest noise that will be there is under the existing major sawing for construction will be done by that planker,
yeah,
as they call them, I think.
What? A planker?
Planker, which actually cuts.
I thought they called us plankers, not planker.
No, that's yourself. The planker, that one will take place within the building. It will be what you would be doing within your own sheds, as it were. Cutting relatively small amounts of wood to make small stuff. The big stuff with big electrical would be, well, you wouldn't do that inside anyway, unless you've got a vastly big building, because it could be, I think it can fall foul of the health and safety. Dust, etc. would do that. But anyway, that's the position. Councillor Hardwick.
Yeah, well, my question really is based on exactly the conversation that's just taken place with regards to the bandsaw. It was obviously located outside, and I would suggest that that is probably the noisiest operation that will take place with timber work. I have seen those pieces of equipment actually housed, but it's also been stated earlier in the debate that is the building actually insulated and sort of air quality control, etc., suitable for that to be located within the building. And I would suggest that with the type of work that is being suggested that is going to take place, that bandsaw will actually be used more and should be actually located within the building if we grant permission.
Councillor Norman.
I think my question's actually to some extent been answered, because as I understand it, a lot of the work that's being proposed will be using hand tools. But I've also picked up from the very recent discussion that there will be the use of this heavier piece of equipment, and it sounds like that almost couldn't be inside because of health and safety, as some of these.
Well, I doubt in the current building that's there.
Well,
but bear in mind that we can't control that under our existing.
No.
They could continue to use that outside, so it's slightly academic.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Norman, are there any other? Councillor Boyle.
Sorry, just to come back if I may. The proposed industries that are coming in, or the light industrial, how local are they, and how many people are going to be involved, do you think? And is it going to be much adverse increase in traffic or not? So I think that's also important.
Just in terms of the sort of highway safety concerns, that's summarised in paragraph 6.15 to 6.16. I mean, it's not something we can necessarily stand there and enforce in terms of the number of vehicles coming in and going, but it's been put to us that 10 vehicles represents the likely maximum number of visitors at any one time. And these would be smaller vehicles as opposed to the lot of the heavy forestry vehicles. They would be more vans or cars. So I don't think there was any concern about impact on the road network or the capability of accommodating that traffic.
Thank you. Yes, I think Councillor Norman's idea of having horses who draw out the timber is delightful, but probably impractical, I'm afraid. And carrying it by a timber wagon drawn by horses all the way from trailers might be, shall we say, adverse on the other traffic. Right. But I do know that in certain places, horses are the only things that can get timber out of difficult roads. I don't think this applies here.
That goes on a tremendous amount. Councillor Fagan.
Just looking at what the CPRE is saying, and again, their concerns are in line with what the Woodland Trust is saying, is that the concern is possible damage to the sensitive site through the intensification of the use of forestry with increased traffic and noise, light and general disturbance. I think if we pass this application, we have to accept that there will be increased noise, light and general disturbance, and that with these kind of sensitive woodland, that is what makes the difference. Actually, you know, we're talking about this is a piece of woodland which does have a designation, ancient, semi-ancient woodland with protected status, and I think that for me is the really difficult part. I feel that industry like this would probably be better out of an ancient woodland than inside it.
I guess if I could just come back on that, just in terms of if we'd have had an ecology objection from our qualified ecologist, I would be agreeing with you. Difficulty I have if we have the comments that we have, which say no, potentially no concerns in terms of the habitat regulations, or in terms of there's a forest of bean backsack which is nearby, so there's no concerns in terms of impacts on those species, foraging and commuting. We've got a condition on lighting, so we've got to look at the application in a positive and proactive manner and see whether conditions could address the concerns. So having regard to that technical response, I struggle to see how I could justify as a professional officer recommending refusal.
Can I also say that if you notice that it is cited, the wood, the bulk of the wood lies some way away from that particular site. It's in a narrow, this is located in a narrow band of woodland leading up to the principal part of the woodland. Some way off from that. I think that was shown on the maps. It isn't actually that map in the agenda, but that map shows that it is, the bulk of it is some considerable way away from this particular development.
But I think, Chair, if I may just respond, I think that the difficulty is that with ancient woodland is it's not just the trees and the woods, it's the whole site, it's the whole ecology, and I think that that's what these concerns are relating to.
Chairman, if I just come back on that, you have your professional ecologist report on that, raising no objections. That should give you the confidence to move forward with a positive recommendation on in that particular area. You know, they are your professional officers. They've assessed the application for you, and they've come forward with their comments, and they're clearly within the report. And that's where that's where you should be looking. If you've got those concerns, you should look at the responses from your professional officers who've made those comments.
So, Chairman,
Councillor Hardwick.
Right, just a continuation really of my original question with regards to the bandsaw. It looks a relatively new piece of equipment. Do we know how long it's been in situ, and as to whether the use of it to date has actually caused any nuisance with regards to sound pollution?
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know the precise period of time it's been there. As I say, it does look relatively new, doesn't it? And I don't know if we've had any complaints, but nothing being relayed to me from our EHO.
Councillor Bowen, I do think we're going round and round.
We are a bit, I think. I'm just trying to sum up the whole thing. We have a forestry license there to take out another 1,500 tons of wood from this ancient woodland site. And we have no objection from the county ecologist that we are doing any substantial harm by doing this. And basically, there are matters in hand to make sure that we do not disturb wildlife more than is absolutely necessary to carry out the license. We don't have any substantive objections as far as I can see. I think the main thing is to make sure that the neighbours are not pressed by vast sounds of woodworking and such. And if we can make sure and we check that the woodworking noises are kept to a minimum and contained within the building, except of course we've got that bandsaw outside which has been working so far. And I don't know if there are any objections to that at all. I probably believe not, but I think we must try and make sure that the noise mitigation for the neighbours is kept to a high standard. And otherwise, I think, well, difficult to oppose it, I think.
Yeah, can I just say that the bandsaw is not part of this particular application. Right, that's been sort of proposed and seconded that the officer's recommendation. Can I have members indicate those in favour? Sorry, Councillor. Do you want to add any further, Mr. Bishop?
Just to say, Chairman, just that obviously it's been a well-considered debate. Members have picked up the various issues relating to the application. We've heard the officer's appraisal of the proposal and the aspects that we picked up relate to the impact on the ancient woodland, etc., and the neighbours as well. But offset that against the report which you have before you, where you have your professional officers advising you accordingly. So thank you, Chairman.
Finally, Councillor Wilding. Someone.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, just to clarify, this new business will be in addition to the forest logging and felling. So large lorries and stuff would still be coming. I was hoping that the committee would recognise this application should be refused, but it looks to me pretty 50-50 at the moment. If the committee is minded to grant this application, then I would urge that we beef up the conditions so that we contain the impact of industrialising this ancient woodland. And I would suggest we make sure that no further encroachment or expansion can go with outside the area already indicated. And that all machinery, apart from that used for the felling, must be used in a fully enclosed, soundproofed building with acoustic panels and other noise reduction methods installed, and that the windows and doors should be shut while those things are happening. I'd also like to see the hours of operation change slightly. I think you're saying 8:30 to 6 p.m. I think that's too long. I think it should be at least 9 till 5, possibly dusk in winter, because animals and things going on start moving about when it's dusk. I think the lights should be off between 5:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. and there should definitely be dark sky lighting and no importation of wood. And finally, I think all the new business that's being introduced should be done within the building. So if that planker, or whatever it's called, is going to be used to make things like that large structure that we saw on site, that's not going to be done all year. Because at the moment we're saying that planker is used just when the forestry felling is happening. But if it's used all year round to make those large constructions, then it will obviously have to be outside. So, as I say, all new business work and things created by the business should be done within the building. They would be my recommendations. Thanks.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we have unless the proposer and seconder are changing it, we have the movement for the officer's recommendation as outlined in the agenda.
Chairman, just to confirm that the condition does provide for that. The use of noise generating plant and equipment in association with uses hereby permitted, excluding existing forestry operations, shall be restricted to 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock, Monday to Saturday, and this noise generating activity shall only take place within the fully enclosed part of the building. So the bandsaw, which is outside, could not be used as part of this proposal because it's outside the building. It's not. It's part of the noise generating activity, so that could not be used for this proposal.
Right, Chair. Can I say we can amend? No, we have a proposal as proposed, unless the proposer and seconder are minded to change them.
I can see no reason to change, so.
Okay. Can now members indicate those members who are in favour of the officer's recommendation as outlined in the paper? Those against? 2 abstentions. Then that is carried. Perhaps now we'll move on to item 7. If Councillor Watts could.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Can I now ask that the public speaker present in person for agenda item 7 join the meeting, Mr. John Bothamley and the local resident, Mrs. Eleanor Watkins, for the planning agent. Please take your seats. Okay, good morning. I welcome you to the meeting and we'll call you to speak following the officer's presentation of the application. Great. Thank you. Now I ask Morgan to make a presentation of this particular item.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to members who had time on site yesterday morning. The application is for a proposed tourism unit at Carwin Farm. This would include the conversion of 2 barns for holiday lets, to the construction of 3 holiday chalets, the rebuilding of shed to an indoor activity area for guests and a barbecue pavilion, with the use of the existing bungalow on site as holiday accommodation. The application site comprises Carwin Farm, a small farmstead located approximately 1.8 miles to the west of St. Leonard's, accessed from a private driveway off the C1236. This is proposed to be resurfaced with the inclusion of passing places, as well as the creation of a new access point off the road. Carwin Farm is located outside of any identified settlement, St. Leonard's being the closest to the west, Galway to the south, and Orcott to the north. As such, it's concluded that the site occupies an open countryside location. Due to this, condition would be included on any approval to restrict tourism use only, with no unit being occupied for any more than 28 consecutive days. This has been included in the update sheet for members. Next slide, please. The site is comprised of 2 existing traditional barns, 2 agricultural sheds, and a bungalow. An additional modern barn is located to the north of the red line, proposed to be relocated subject to planning, as the applicant does not intend to move agricultural machinery and vehicles within the tourism complex. Policy RA6 of the core strategy lends support to proposals which diversify the rural economy, including small-scale extensions of existing businesses or promoting sustainable tourism proposals of an appropriate scale in accordance with policy E4 tourism. The postscript to this policy recognises that visitors come to the county to enjoy the countryside, and therefore tourism proposals in open countryside locations are acceptable where they're designed for truly holiday purposes. Furthermore, Objective 9 of the core strategy seeks pursuit of sustainable tourism opportunities, which is pertinent via policy RA3, whereby the sustainable reuse of redundant or disused buildings will be supported where it complies with RA5 and leads to an enhancement of the immediate setting. As such, there's a broad support for tourist accommodation, even in countryside locations, where considered sustainable, having regards to the 3 pillars set out in the NPPF. There are potential benefits of UK residents holidaying at home as an alternative to international flights, as well as reducing personal carbon footprint. The provision of additional units would deliver some economic benefits to local services and amenities, with a number of villages and towns within reasonable distances. Genuine opportunity for active travel is provided on site with cycle storage and access to adjacent Prow footpath. Though it's appreciated guests would need to arrive and depart by car, the scheme offers longer stay holiday lets with entertainment on site, reducing the need for movements outside of the unit. The applicant has provided a sustainability appraisal showing this has been considered in the ethos of the scheme. Next slide, please. Moving on to the conversion units, due to the scale and construction of the traditional farms, it's evident they are no longer suitable for modern farming practice, with the wider farming activities proposed to be located away from the site. The buildings are capable of supporting conversion, subject to repair and remedial works that would not be considered to amount to substantial rebuild in accordance with RA5 with the support of E4. The scheme utilises a sympathetic design, making use of existing openings and windows to retain the agricultural character of the barns. Barn 1 would require more work, being open at one side and the lean-to being removed. However, this is considered a visual improvement on the existing structure, whilst maintaining the agricultural character. The use of the existing vacant bungalow on the site as tourist accommodation is acceptable within the wider aims of the site. Next slide, please. The existing pole barn on the site is proposed to be rebuilt to offer an indoor activity centre, providing swimming pool and communal space, and a barbecue pavilion to offer guests covered outdoor cooking space. Both buildings maintain an agricultural form with minimal visual impact on the wider setting. The activity building taking reference from existing design, reading as an agricultural shed. Given the proposal seeks to offer accommodation for families, the provision of facilities would encourage guests to spend time within the complex, adults enjoying the rural location and tranquility with entertainment and activities available for younger family members. Next slide, please. The proposed new units would utilise a chalet-style design approach of simple rectangular form with a pitched roof, clad in timber boarding. The design is contemporary and responds to the agricultural and rural context of the surrounding buildings. Whilst larger than a typical holiday chalet, the scale of the units would not be considered out of keeping given the existing buildings on the site. Their scale reflects the aim of the proposal to offer longer stay accommodation for families or groups. These would be laid out in a staggered manner with no amenity space surrounding them, alleviating the possibility for them to be separated for private residential dwellings in future. Next slide, please. Amended site plans have been submitted in line with the recommendations of the landscape officer, including the addition of native hedgerow and trees surrounding the site boundary, the new buildings and the hard standing, so to soften the impact of the new built form and integrate the scheme into the wider setting. No objection has been raised by the landscape officer, with conditions included for detailed landscape scheme and maintenance plan. Next slide, please. The site occupies an elevated position, but sits below the skyline, reading within the rising topography of the surrounding land, with mature boundary features in place. The site is visible from public vantage points, namely the adjacent Prow, which is not impacted by development, Coppice Road between St Wallace and Garway, and St Wallace Village itself. The viewpoints are shown in turn on the slide. The submitted landscape and visual impact assessment concludes that the sensitivity from these aspects are considered to be medium, given the new buildings would read as a natural extension to the existing agricultural unit. Furthermore, it states that there would be minimal visual impact due to the surrounding topography and use of good design to integrate the built form into the landscape. The proposal would be visually improve a brownfield site while supporting the reuse of traditional stone barns. Next slide, please. The closest properties, as visible on the aerial photo, are Northgate Farm, approximately 430 metres to the southwest, and Upper Cottage, over 600 metres to the southeast. Given this distance, there is not considered to be a demonstrable impact with regards to loss of privacy or noise and nuisance. This has been confirmed by the lack of objection from the Environmental Health Officer. In addition to this, whilst there would be an increased vehicle movements along the existing driveway, in response to the consultation comments received, the proposal seeks to construct a new access further west, which would relocate movement away from the existing Upper Cottage and alleviate noise nuisance. The supporting sustainability appraisal has included details of management with check-in and check-out times outside of peak commuting times, and 3 distinct lengths of stay with all changeover days limited to Monday or Friday, and a site manager to deal with the administrative duties will be available for a few hours each day on site. There's good visibility along the driveway given the topography of the land, which is proposed to be resurfaced with the inclusion of passing places, including 4 new meters of access track. Condition is suggested to secure details of the vehicle access as well as a construction management plan. The new access approximate location shown by the arrow would have improved visibility display compared to the existing. The proposed parking and turning space has been reviewed by the highways engineer with no objection received. The local network having the capacity to accommodate the movements and the associated vehicle uplift, therefore not considered to be severe in accordance with the NPP Act. Next slide, please. Surface water is proposed to be managed by a sustainable drainage system with attenuation pond and drainage ditch located within the applicant's ownership. The supporting documentation also states rainwater collection will be used where possible for site irrigation. Our water is proposed to be managed by a private package treatment plant discharging to a drainage mound. Land drainage engineers have raised no objection to these methods and all the testing with technical details required through condition. The application has also been supported by an ecological appraisal and VAT report. The ecologist raised no objections to the findings and mitigation and enhancement measures which are secured by condition. Restriction on external lighting to protect dark skies and the submission of a construction environmental management plan is secured by condition also. Habitat regulation assessment has been undertaken, finding no adverse effects on the integrity of the River Wye Special Area of Conservation, and Natural England concur with these conclusions. Next slide, please. The applicant has requested that the following video be included in the presentation to aid in the visual understanding of the scheme. To summarise, the application proposes a rural tourism development in open countryside location. Whilst this may not be considered sustainable in purely locational sense, it is accepted that rural character of the area is appealing to tourists, and this is reflected in policy E4. The proposal includes the reuse of traditional agricultural buildings of architectural merit, with contemporary chalets integrated into the agricultural character and rural setting, providing a complex of tourist accommodation for long stays with leisure and activity facilities on the site for guests. There have been no technical objections to the scheme with recommended conditions by consultees included in the committee report. The proposal is in accordance with the NPPF and core strategy policies, and therefore it is your office's recommendation that this application be approved subject to the recommended conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan, for a thorough presentation. Right, now I'll call on Mr. Bottomley, to a local resident, speak in objection to this application. Mr. Bottomley.
Thank you, John Bottomley, and good morning to you all. I'm a neighbour of the applicant and I represent several other neighbours and local objectors. Our objections are many, but there are 3 principal ones. And the first one relates to the documentation, which is very muddled and doesn't show the overall holding. It doesn't include the driveway, and it doesn't include the relationship within the standard red line, as you would expect on a planning application, nor does it include the overall holding of the applicant. The drawings are very confusing. There's a superseded entrance plan and an amended new entrance plan, both dated the 22nd of the 11th, 21. And the planning officer's report, 6.24, refers to new access 3.5 meters to the west, which contradicts one or other of the drawings I've just referred to. It is flawed. The amount of background information is just not sufficient for you, I believe, to make a proper assessment. Secondly, the planning statement, paragraph 5.3, refers to the moving of existing steel portal frame livestock building. This application must not proceed until that planning application is considered. And thirdly, access to the site. From the A465, visitors will travel approximately 4 kilometres along the single track C1236, followed by a further 700 odd metres along a private single track driveway. Let me describe that journey from St Morland's. It's a single track road with very few informal passing places. The width over much of the length is less than 3 metres, which somewhat ironically is less than the width of the new driveway the applicant proposes, in inverted commas, to allow for the passing of 2 vehicles. There is one semi-formal passing place. It's on a bend with insufficient width for farm vehicles to pass. There are 10 field gateways used as informal passing places. Their width is insufficient for large vehicles and tractors and trailers to pass. And the grass verges and banks are regularly damaged when vehicles attempt to pass each other, especially in the winter. There's no footpath alternative to the site, and in fact, footpath coverage in this area is very little, and there's no route that parallels the road or is available for pedestrians or cyclists. There are high hedges and at least 6 severe bends where visibility is minimal. There are no warning signs, and there are open ditches on both sides of the road, which fall away within inches of the road surface, especially west of the entrance to Kestley Farm. I guess on your site visit, you would have driven that road and you would have seen there are some very narrow pieces indeed, and there's no street lighting. The applicant proposes that visitors will be, and I quote, encouraged to use public transport.
Look, I'm afraid you've gone over your time. There's a 3-minute limit.
I'm extremely sorry. I had timed this and I thought I was only up to 2 minutes. Are you sure on that, sir?
Yes, I can confirm you've gone over 3 minutes.
You've gone over 2 minutes.
Over 3 minutes.
In which case I apologise, but I rest my case.
And now I'll call on Ms. Watkins to make, on behalf of the applicant, her presentation.
Thank you to those who joined us yesterday at the site visit. Having now visited the site and seen the architect's video, I hope you can see what we visualised for the site, and ultimately that it will be a betterment than the current very brownfield farmyard. Crucially, any agricultural activities on the farmyard would cease if the proposal was granted, and that building would be relocated off-site, subject to a secondary planning application thereafter. Sustainability is the word of this application, and that is where we started when we designed this scheme. The core strategy states that rural tourism is encouraged where it keeps visitors in the county for longer. Glamping pods are typically 2 to 3 night stays. We designed Coendi for 5 to 7 nights minimum. We are not seeking to displace competitor schemes, and we want to do something different. Offering the recreation barn enables us to do this. It's not there to provide a full day's entertainment, but it's certainly a good hour or 2 activities every day, which kids will love. And it's there in wet weather, or just when mum wants to lie in. We would also seek to offer community use of this facility outside of high season. Between a Russian invasion, Brexit, and airport pandemonium, we have not seen the return to cheap abroad holidays that was predicted, and COVID did make us realise what was on our doorstep, and that we are still finding an abundance of visitors enjoying Herefordshire at every opportunity. Supply is not yet exceeding demand. The whole site has been developed considering both planning policy and landscape. The site was designed with agricultural architecture in mind, so from a distance, if you were able to pick the site out, which might be harder than you think, the chalets will appear to be one long agricultural building. The applicant is keen that this project achieves environmental betterment with swathes of new planting and complementary landscaping, alike all of the Lanty farms. There is no doubt that this proposal will result in a distinct betterment environmentally and aesthetically than existing.
Herefordshire is fast becoming a tourist destination with masses of PR in national newspapers this year alone. We are truly spoiled in the south of the Wye with an abundance of excellent eateries. This site offers many economic benefits alongside job creation. It is a benefit to all of those places while staying on site. And additionally, the communal Australian-inspired barbecue area offers the best of stay-home dining, where guests can enjoy local produce from a wealth of local suppliers and quality butchers in the area, and cook their own whilst enjoying that excellent view. The proposal has been designed to mitigate wider disruption. Soundproofing, downlighting, and non-reflective glass will be implemented across the site. Highways have raised no objection to the scheme and confirmed that the highway can absorb the traffic. Those that visited the site yesterday saw that we were not exaggerating when we said it is not a busy road. We stood there for a long time and saw less than 5 cars pass. A new access supported by highways will mitigate the immediate and perhaps the most notable neighbour concern, as the entrance will no longer directly adjoin their property. And perhaps we were short-sighted not to consider this in the first place. Ultimately today, that you need to remember that the parish council has supported this application, and crucially, the planning officer has seen this proposal within policy.
Okay. I'm sorry, your time has passed the 3 minutes. Sorry about that. If you could now take your places back in the public gallery.
Yes, I've seen it before.
So I now ask the ward member, Councillor Fagan, to make her opening presentation.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Morgan for a really thorough report, and to those people who came on the site visit yesterday. It was important, I think, to get a sense of perspective for this application. And I must say that throughout the time of this application, there have been sort of various elements that have been put to the applicant regarding the impact of development, and they have worked to try and mitigate those. The challenges of this application before you are really, do the benefits of what is definitely going to be an upper end tourism venture outweigh the impact of the development? Of greatest concern to those in the vicinity is the sheer scale of the new development in what is remote open countryside, and the impact on the local road network and the sustainability of the project given its position in this remote part of rural Herefordshire. While there are no objections to the reuse of appropriate rural buildings for tourism-related accommodation, there is a substantial amount of new build to this application, and that is at the heart of some concerns about whether that new build is truly sustainable. Are the new build elements appropriate, or would they actually be harmful to the character and appearance of the countryside? Policy RA6 looks at the rural economy and looks to promote sustainable tourism of an appropriate scale. And we have to ask, is the scale of this development appropriate to its rural location and setting? Obviously, you have the comments from the landscape officer who has looked at this in great detail. Being a remote countryside location, the site, those who will be staying on the site will be totally reliant on the use of a private motor vehicle. Those who are opposed to the development say it would create an unsustainable pattern of development, which would have a direct impact on the rural road network of narrow country lanes, which are lined with essential drainage ditches and very few passing places. As observed, it was very quiet yesterday, but actually these roads are quite busy with agricultural equipment at certain times of the year. And often these roads flood during bad weather, and the drainage ditches are often damaged by vehicles which are sort of pulling over to let other vehicles pass. So there are issues with the road network, but these haven't been picked up by highways. Those who live in the area will tell you that the highway network is inadequate to cater for the traffic that will be generated from this development. And whilst there are many commendable features of the proposal, traffic that it would generate, and those who service by those who visit and those who service the site will be a substantial increase to what is there already. There is no form of on-site management accommodation, so there will have to be a manager in and out of the site as well, and various deliveries for food, etc. And these will all be through private motor vehicle. There is a public right of way which passes the site, but that is currently the only public right of way in the area, and it's unlikely anybody is actually going to enter the site either by bicycle or by foot. The site is remote from any amenities and tourist attractions, so that those who are staying there will be totally reliant on their cars. And whilst the proposal includes good facilities to keep residents on site, the challenge will be when those staying in the 6 proposed holiday units venture out to explore Herefordshire as tourists will do. The nearest pub is along the narrow lanes to Galway, and the nearest towns are Ross and Rye or Monmouth. There have been some concerns as to how the site will be managed in terms of security provided and guests met services provided, as there will be no live-on site management. Some concerns raised about the drainage, and although this has been passed by the drainage engineer, there are obviously issues with filtration, and some concerns remain about the proposed foul drainage arrangements, which appear to be suboptimal and may lead to pollution or nuisance. When summing up the planning balance, the officers have stated that there are modest economic benefits to the scheme through local employment, servicing the site, and the social benefits are neutral and the environmental impacts can be mitigated. What you have to decide is whether the impact on the road network and the unsustainable location of a development like this in a rural location, open countryside, outweigh the economic benefits. The question for us is, does the application comply with paragraph 84 of the NPPF, which states that we must ensure that development is sensitive to its surroundings, that it must not have an unacceptable impact on local roads. Does this development exploit those opportunities to make the location more sustainable by foot cycling or public transport? Does the proposal comply with the core strategies RA6, promoting sustainable tourism of appropriate scale? And is the harm to the rural countryside balanced by policy E4, which encourages sustainable tourism, which is not damaging to the character and quality of the environment? I will leave that up to you during the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bagan. Now we'll begin the debate. Can I have anyone who wishes to speak? Councillor Andrews.
I found the site visit very interesting, as you could imagine. It pulls back. I was on holiday earlier this month in France in a group of buildings very much like this, converted farm buildings. They were approached by a single, very narrow road and up a single track to get to these buildings. We all seem to survive quite nicely on transport. It didn't seem to cause too many problems. The ward member mentioned cycling. Well, the nearest town was, I suppose, about 10 miles away. My daughter used to took a bicycle and cycled every day around the area quite safely. So I feel that anybody who brought their bikes to this site could quite safely cycle. She certainly did. I think it's a very interesting proposition, and we have to accept that tourism of this nature is very much increasing in popularity. I think North Herefordshire, as the chairman will tell you, has many similar facilities. I think it's very difficult. It's very much a balance of judgment. And I think in the end, we have to support this sort of facility, which is increasingly popular from people who don't have the good luck to live in this county.
Councillor Rowan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've been fortunate enough to sit on various planning committees over the years. I think there's only ever one application that was more exciting than this, but this is fabulously ambitious. For me, the key part is the conversion of the two lovely barns. It's a wonderful project of investment in rural Herefordshire by a local company, local family. I'm not too sure what capacity. But this, if we understand, this is a top end offering there, which will be busy, I would imagine, all year round. And those visitors to this top end offering will spend locally. My first question, never go anywhere, is where's the local pub? I believe that the Moon at Galway will be sell a few more steak and chips because of this development. I can't stress how much I'm in support of this application. I'm going to go with officer recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got some questions actually, because what I've not been able to pick up, and I'm really sorry, Elsie, is that, so at full capacity, how many occupants will be on the footprint? And how many cars that might be? Because I'm assuming that, you know, people say, oh, well, it might be a family, but there could be a hen party, there could be, you know, like people like three. So the accommodations like 3 bedrooms, then you've got like 3 sets of cars coming in. So that was just my thing. I noticed in your report, and I've seen the conditions about the hedgerow, but there's no condition around the management of the hedgerow. Is it going to be laid and etc., which was actually in the landscape officer's report, and about the paving, about the materials and colours about the paving. The other question is that for me, unfortunately, I couldn't come to the site visit yesterday, but looking at the aerial photo, it actually looks quite close and intensive. The chalets next to each other, and I'm wondering, is it possible, because, and this is a really naive question, but I have a lot of Trojan horses in my ward where buildings are put to holiday let use and then changed to become domestic buildings. And I'm just wondering, is that, you know, if the removal of the holiday let use, you know, is that they are then removed, you know, is that it becomes part of, I know that there's a huge investment in this application. And is there any rainwater harvesting or solar or any sustainable use? They're my questions anyway.
Okay. Can I say, Councillor Watson, the one thing that I did find on this particular development, new build, it is designed that it wouldn't be suitable for residential use because of the close proximity of the new buildings. You'd have to demolish at least one of them in order to make it acceptable for residential use. So I do think that it is a serious application for for tourism and not a Trojan horse, as you particularly say. You want to say anything?
Sure. With regards to the occupancy issue, obviously there's the 3 3-bedroom chalets, 2-bedroom barn conversion, a 1-bedroom barn conversion, and the bungalow is intended for more potentially large groups or an intergenerational family, perhaps. Obviously, it's not something we can condition only families or only in certain cars, but the intention is to provide a high quality family orientated or, you know, small group proposal. In terms of the hedgerows, it was picked up in the landscape comments, which I believe you're referring to. That would come in there's a maintenance plan condition and a specification condition as well. So that would be encompassed in that, and the more detailed aspects of how the hedgerow would be maintained and planted. Just to touch again on the chalets, they are deliberately put close together, so there isn't a separate private amenity space. It alleviates that concern for them becoming separate dwellings, and obviously that would be conditioned, so that would be a separate thing to consider. And they have been designed in this manner to read as one building from afar. You know, this has been taken into consideration, and they are staggered slightly in layout. So to give them that separation for the occupants who would be using them. And again, the rainwater harvesting, it's in the supporting documents. That is an intention. But I appreciate that hasn't been included in the drainage comments or strategy, but it is in there as an intention. We could look at the conditioning.
Okay, obviously, what about the other thing? Sorry to ask about the solar panels and about the paving and materials that are being used, because that was in the landscape report as well, but I couldn't find it in your officer report, but I might have dismissed it.
Yes, we've covered that by condition. We've got condition 9.
Okay.
Those details.
I think we've got to be careful not to putting in all the conditions from the meeting, otherwise we should have meetings lasting for several days. Councillor Walter.
We'll be there in a second. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I was unable to make the visit yesterday, but having looked at the video, it does really sort of throw open the magnitude, I suppose, of this development and the amount of money invested. It looks to me at first sight as a good thing for Herefordshire. We're encouraging tourism. We want people to come. We're taking buildings, we're renovating them. We're doing it in a sympathetic way across the card. My only concern, when we spoke earlier, we were on about passing places, and one of the gentlemen was commenting about the roads and the agricultural vehicles, etc. And there's note that we were going to put in additional passing places. Has that been quantified as to how many and on which roads they're going to be? Because there were a lot of road numbers being quoted, A465 on an unclassified road this or C that or whatever. How will that impact on the local area? Will it make it safer? That's my major question with this. In theory, what I'm concerned with this, I think it's a wonderful project. There's a massive amount of investment into an open plan site. I just want a little bit of clarification on that, please.
And the passing places were being referred to on the new proposed resurfaced access. So the private track that comes off the C1236 would be resurfaced, and that would include an additional passing place. We have got condition 5 that seeks further details on the access track to be constructed, and we can look at securing that at discharge condition say.
So on incoming roads, are there any plans to put additional passing places on those at all?
Okay,
that's fine.
It's always very difficult with that because
I appreciate that.
The land is not necessarily in the ownership of the applicant.
I appreciate that. It's just something from a point of view of, understanding the narrowness of the roads, etc.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Norman.
Thank you. Interesting to hear other members' views. I wasn't able to get to the site visit either, and obviously it helps if you can, so it's useful to hear from people who actually have been there. As one of my colleagues said, this does sound a really exciting project, and all sorts of aspects of it I think are very attractive. My concern, as I think all of us, is about the impact on the roads. This is always an issue when you've got minor narrow roads, and what's inevitably going to be an increase in traffic is that is going to have an impact. It can't not. So that is a concern, certainly from my point of view, and I'm sure from local residents. A couple of things other than that to mention. It's encouraging to see that the green infrastructure, the term, but planting, the hedges, trees and all the rest of it is there is a planting plan, and that the management of that is incorporated into this, which I think is important, because often good intentions end up with these things getting lost or not properly looked after in the long term. Interested to hear that the on-site entertainment is going to be available to the local community. Is that condition? Sorry, I should know, but I can't recall having seen that specifically. It's an encouraging idea, although of course it will perversely also add to traffic to some extent. But is that condition that's that external use is going to be.
I think it's better to look at the other way. It's not prevented. We're not conditioning it not to be used. So it's within the gift of the applicants to open it up to citizens.
Right, so that's from the sort of structural point of view, but it doesn't mean that they'll actually get that use necessarily in the long run. Councillor Watson has already mentioned the sustainable aspects of the buildings, so that's encouraging to hear about that, water conservation and so on, because as we all know, energy use is heating the roof, and water likewise is a matter of real concern. So if we're not looking at those things, I think we're very remiss indeed, so that's encouraging. Just one thing I wasn't clear on, obviously some of the roads will have to be, paved in the usual way, but have we said that where possible surfaces should be permeable? So the sort of parking areas and the areas that aren't actually roadways need to be permeable. Is that part of what we're asking for? Anything to reduce water runoff clearly and opportunity to populate is very important, I think.
That's a form part of the specifications that they submitted, part and parcel of the conditions associated with it.
We'd be encouraging that, I hope.
Absolutely.
Good, that's fine. And finally, really, I overall, although it is tremendous and attractive and all sorts, it seems excessive, I'm afraid, to me. It really does. The conversion of the building seems terrific. We want to see these buildings converted in sympathetic ways, but the addition of 3 extra does call it all into question to some extent, and it is the scale that again becomes a problem in many respects. Thank you.
Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to say that it was a very worthwhile site visit yesterday, and an excellent presentation this morning as well. Mr. Bottomley, when he addressed the committee, he actually made reference to the fact there was no information with regards to the ownership of land by the applicant. Is the planning officer aware of ownership of the land between St. Wonards and the actual site on the sea road, as to whether there would be a sort of feasibility of putting in any passing places on that section of the road? Because that would be my only reservation, basically, of the actual application itself. But otherwise, I'm pretty supportive of the scheme.
There was some blue line included on one of the location plans, but the Trevelyan farm that we met at yesterday is owned by the applicant as well. In terms of the wider ownership, I'm not sure, because it hasn't impacted upon this application. The only thing that has impacted it is that the drainage mounds, etc., are in his ownership. I'm not sure we'd be looking at asking for passing places at this stage, within, not knowing his ownership, where it ends and starts, essentially.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I would have thought that it would have been an elementary sort of part of the application. We've seen applications in front of us in the past for other business enterprises within the county, and where there's delivery lorries, etc., actually cited in the delivery plan. Passing places have been part of the specification required, to allow the planning permission. That it would have been good, in my opinion, to have understood the total ownership of the land holding of the applicant, to see whether a passing place was a feasible option.
Yeah, it's something that ought to be borne in mind in further negotiation, further discussions with the applicant when it comes to conditions, etc. Not that we can impose it, but that it might be in the interest of the applicant to the viability of the actual project.
Yeah.
Councillor Durkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Very interesting debate, and I, like Councillor Rowe and Councillor Hardwick, I'm very supportive of this, so I would ask that the approval be asked for.
Right. The motion be put, I think.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I was struggling, Chair.
We have a recommendation along the officers' recommendation, but that's been moved and seconded by members of the committee. I think it was Councillor Andrews and Councillor Rome seconded. No, sorry, it hasn't been moved. Oh, right. Sorry, are you moving? Are you moving? Oh, moving
the motion, Chairman.
Moving the motion. I think there's a song, isn't there? Something like
the approval.
Councillor Hardwick.
I'm quite happy to second the proposal, but I wonder whether we could put a condition in with regards to passing places on the sea road, if it is a feasible option, if the land is within the ownership of the applicant.
Mr. Bishop.
Chairman, I was going to come in and make a couple of suggestions. That was one. I just discussed it with the case officer. It does appear that the applicant does have ownership of land either side of that. So that will need to be clarified. I would suggest we can weave it into an additional condition for they are proposing one passing bay which is near the entrance. I would also suggest, Chairman, if the proposer is happier as well, that we weave into that the access and parking, the access to the site, including the new access onto the road and the passing bays, are available for use prior to first occupation of the premises as well. Because having quickly run through the conditions here, there doesn't appear to be a trigger for that to happen. So I would recommend that if you leave that with the officers, to amend or add an additional condition relating to the passing bays in the plural, being the one which they've got they're proposing, and see if we can add an additional one further up the lane. That's a discussion the applicants can have with the officer as regards that. And if you delegate the decision to officers to do that in conjunction with the chairman and local member.
Chairman, as the motion for approval, I'm more the consent with what Mr. Bishop is saying.
And that also includes water harvesting as well.
Right. Are there no other speakers? We have the motion.
Yeah, I'll just confirm that I'm happy with that addition as well, Chairman.
Can I say, I was very impressed with this particular application. Like Councillor Rowan, I think it's one of the best applications we've had for a long day. The quality of it is very, very good. It is a serious tourism application, not as sometimes is the case, and we had recently in the north of the county a Trojan horse, which was obvious. Anyway, so it's been closed. Client now. Nothing further you want to say, Mr. Bishop?
No, I think members have clearly debated the details of the application. They've grasped the fact that it's a tourism-related facility. There's conditions on there which limits the proposal to tourism. The applicants could have just come in with the barns and the bungalow and just look to have them as a facility. I should imagine that the additional costs of the on-site facilities such as swimming pool, etc., need the support of the additional units to actually cater for that. The assumption I know that was well, what happens if this all fails? It could go into residential. That is something for the future. Hopefully it won't. It'll be an exciting development within the rural area, which will be bringing further support into the county, into the local economy, and supporting heritage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pagan, now to someone.
Thank you, members, for your debate, and thank you for looking at the issues around the road network, because that is definitely something that is of concern to local residents. Obviously, the way the rural area will change over the next few years is not going to be easy for some people, but there are obviously worse things that could happen on this site. But you've discussed the issues, the scale of the new build, which obviously is probably what makes the venture cost effective or not. But is one of the issues of concern for those who are objecting to this application. And the rainwater harvesting condition, I think that will be a really good addition to this application, because there are concerns about the permeability of soil in this area, and anything that we can do to actually mitigate against the flow of water across the surfaces when it comes down in its torrents will be a good thing. I don't think that there's actually anything more that I can say about this. I can see that you are moved to go with the officer recommendation, and I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fagan. Now we have the motion on the table, which is the officer's recommendation plus the amendments as outlined by Mr. Bishop. Can I now ask for those in favour, please show. Those against? Abstentions? 1. Then that motion is carried. Can I now formally close the meeting and ask that the live stream be turned on?